Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club podcast with Jen and Karlee. We're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed.
We are creating a safe space to bring moms together, lighten the heaviness, and find joy in the everyday moments. Together, we will share our own experiences of being new moms while navigating the topics we wish more people talked about.
Join us every Monday to hear us skip the small talk and dive right into the uncomfortable.
Good morning. Happy Mom Day, Karlee.
Good morning. Happy Mom Day. It's a beautiful day. Oh, that was too high. I didn't like it. It's a beautiful day.
That's more of your usual.
I'm like a male opera singer.
It's way better than I could do, so you could keep doing it.
Well, yeah, happy Mom Day. What's new with you? Tell the people, tell the fam.
Honestly, we're dealing with some silent reflux, which is something I didn't really know much about until we're dealing with it.
Not so silent anymore.
No, it ends up being a lot of crying. It's like the loud reflux.
Yeah.
But, we're doing okay. We're getting through, and baby's now over 3 months old. So we're like out of that. Everything seems like dire under 3 months, like a fever. Oh, they have anything. Like it seems like such a big deal. But now that she's like a lot more developed and grown, I feel like we're in a little bit more of a
bit of a rhythm. She's a big girl now.
Yeah, that's good. We're getting lots more smiles.
Yeah, almost a teenager.
Almost.
Yeah. She's with us today. So if you hear little cute baby sounds, it's not Jen or me. Or
we're not cute.
No, we're not cute. We don't make cute sounds. But
what is new with you? Oh, Karlee just got over it. Well, not
me.
Not you, but Henry just had hand, foot, and mouth.
Yeah, so. It was la poo poo. Would not recommend. Started for him with pink eye. Like he had a little bit of what we thought was just a cold, and he had pink eye. So we kept him out of daycare Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday morning he had like a suspicious spot, and then Saturday afternoon he was full on hand, foot, mouth, spots everywhere, and he was like sick literally for like 10 days. Yeah. Like Wednesday to Saturday essentially. And then he just turned a corner and now he's just having the best time in life. He decided he likes food again. He likes us again. Everything's funny. So as hard as it is when they're sick, sometimes when they come out of that like sick spiral and all of a sudden are enjoying life again, it's just so wonderful because you're like, you're reminded of the good better things than before. Even his daycare teacher was like, oh my God, he's so big now, and was like so surprised that he'd grown so much in 10 days. Like he literally has just become a human. And
I know, and he's in daycare, which is great since he missed like 2 weeks.
Yeah, but sleep now is a struggle because when they're sick, you go back to all the like crutches and stuff, and now he was night weaned and just went to bed on his own. Like he would literally just crawl into bed and he would wave and say goodbye and then just go to sleep. And now it's a production of wrestling and
big into the boobs again, right?
He's obsessed. I have to nurse him to sleep. And we've tried other things, but it's just not working. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to nurse you to sleep until...
Sometimes you need the capacity to deal with some of these things, like the sleep training and whatever sleep training looks like for you. You need to have the capacity to do it, and that can be hard. So
I know. So he's getting boobed to sleep at night, and then he's waking up, and we have a gate up at the top of the stairs, and we've stopped locking his door, so he just walks out of his room and into ours, and then just comes and taps on us and crawls into bed. He's like, guys, I'm here for the
Snuggle
milkers.
Me.
Yep, show me the milkers.
Give me the boobs.
So we're gonna navigate that because we had a really great sleep routine for a while, and now we're not in it. It ain't it. That's life.
Yeah. Well, today we have an exciting guest. We have Bree, and she is Diary of a People Pleaser. And so if you don't follow her on Instagram, or that's also her website, but she is great. And she is a certified counselor and life coach. She helps women recognize and break free from people-pleasing patterns, develop and strengthen their self-worth, and begin to feel empowered to set healthy, kind boundaries without guilt. We have had the pleasure to hear her speak a couple times now, and we both were like, we need to get her on here. And
Definitely.
So we are just so excited to have her today.
Every time I hear her talk, I just I leave it feeling like invigorated and empowered.
Yes.
Like, I deserve the world. And then it also makes me realize like how many areas I need to work on in terms of like my own self-worth and setting boundaries, prioritizing. So I'm going to go and do some journaling and reflect on this episode because it was great. This is the third time we've kind of chatted with her and I still learned stuff. So.
I know. I feel like we could talk for hours with her.
We could.
I mean, Karlee and I don't have a problem talking with people, but she is just so full of knowledge, and we hope that you can really learn something, take something away from today's episode about that you are worthy and you have self-worth and what to do with that self-worth.
For sure. And go follow her on Instagram at diaryofapeoplepleaser_. She is just such a breath of fresh air. And actually, she has like actual tips, things that you can do. And she's a very different perspective from so many people. So yeah, definitely go follow her. And here's Bree. We have, drum roll. Oh, we lost Jen already. She's getting the baby. We have Bree from Diary of a People Pleaser coming to join us. Hello, Bree. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We are very excited to have you because historically, women in society, mothers in society, get bad labels when they do or ask for anything for themselves, like setting boundaries. So you're here to tell us why that's not true and that boundaries are important. Yeah. So why don't you just start us off? Tell us about who you are, what you do, what's your jam?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm Breanne, as you mentioned, and I am a recovering people pleaser myself. So I think I was about 35 years old when I heard the word boundary. And I was like, what are these? Yeah. How come nobody ever taught me this concept in the 35 years that I've been alive? And so all I knew growing up was that I was anxious. I was afraid to be myself. I was afraid to be seen. I had this crippling desire to always be accepted and liked by everybody else. And that led to eating disorders, alcoholism, trying to find acceptance and approval and validation in the wrong ways. And I'm over 10 years sober now. Amazing. And mom of 3. And what that journey did for me was really start to look at what's the root of it. So I knew that I had, a problem where I was coping with alcohol. I was trying to force my body to be something that I thought everybody else wanted it to be. I needed my worth and value to come from other people thinking certain things about me. And I was just like, what is this? Where is this all coming from? Yeah. And I realized that the root of it was people pleasing. And I was like, oh, I thought people pleasing was being a good thing. Yeah. I thought it was like
being a good person.
You're being nice to everybody. You're so kind. You sacrifice yourself for others. Like that is just an angelic thing to do. I actually deserve an award. So talking about people pleasing is causing all these terrible things in my life.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I really started to dig into that, I've realized then how awful and crippling it is and how much it robs women of joy and happiness and authenticity and everything. And this Diary of a People Pleaser was born.
Yeah, I love it. So when did you start your Instagram account on this journey?
So after I had my 3rd, I had really bad postpartum anxiety. And I felt like on my personal Instagram, I didn't even want to post a picture of my own self, like by myself. Because I was like, people are going to be like, look at her. She thinks she's so conceited. She's posting pictures of herself. Like I had all these narratives of what I thought other people were going to say about me that I couldn't even post an own picture on my own Instagram without kids. Yeah. Like if I had the kids with me, then I felt like it was okay. Yeah. And I was like, I am sick of this. I just want to start a new Instagram account in the universe where nobody knows me and I can just be who I am. I can show up authentically. I can speak about what I'm going through. So it actually started as Diary of Real Me because I was using it as a diary to talk about my anxiety and talk about my feelings and just be authentic. And through that, I started to really get into people pleasing and boundaries, and it just became such a passion for me. Yeah. And so Leo's going to be 4, so about 4 years.
Okay.
Wow. I do think there's something about motherhood that makes you kind of reevaluate some life choices and like how you want your kids to see you and how you want to raise them. Like there is something about having kids and starting a family that makes you look inward and see like, what are they going to see when they grow up and what am I being like? And
for sure,
I'm also a people pleaser and it's something that I'm working on. And it's why I love following your account. I love all the things that you share. And we're lucky that we've heard you speak a few times now, once at Belly's and once at the Ignite Motherhood Summit. Yeah. And we love what you do and what you talk about. And we think it's important for all moms to kind of learn more about it, but also get some of these reminders. Some of it is stuff that we know, but we don't accept or
acknowledge. Like
acknowledge and use those tools. Like it's stuff that we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We don't have to please everyone. But then we do, and we don't actually listen to it or like follow through with it, right?
And that's what I really would love to talk to you about today because I think that's one of the most frustrating things from my standpoint is we live in a time right now where when you go on Instagram or wherever, it's like set boundaries and, you know, you deserve to have boundaries. And, you know, if people don't like it, just that's up to them and it's their problem. And it's like, okay, that's all great and well.
Yeah.
But
how?
when you are rooted in fear, then you're not going to actually set those boundaries. You're like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to.
Yep.
Just like I know I'm supposed to like eat certain things and exercise this amount and this and that, but it's like doing it is a totally different thing.
Totally.
You're going to the root. So like we can't just like slap a Band-Aid boundary on it if we don't.
Think about a tree, right?
Yeah, love trees.
I'm looking at trees right now. So they're beautiful and they have all their stems and right now there's lots of flowers and stuff like that. So what we're seeing is like the people-pleasing tendencies in your life. So it's like this branch has trouble saying no. This branch doesn't like arguments, so they just shut down. This branch doesn't want to tell their friend how they feel because they're worried that they're going to lose them. So the branches are all the people pleasing that you're doing in your life. But where is the tree rooted in, right? That's what we need to get into is the roots of the people pleasing. Why are you people pleasing? Why are you afraid to set that boundary?
If you cut off one of the branches, it's just going to regrow. Like you have to stop it at the roots. It makes sense. Okay.
This reminds me of the song, the branch was on the tree and the tree was in the hole and the hole was in the ground and the green grass grew all around. No?
Oh, yeah,
you know?
yeah. Okay.
You keep talking about branches and I'm just like playing that song in my head. So today we're going to talk a lot about boundaries and people pleasing. So before we get into that discussion, why don't you just tell us what people pleasing is and how you recognize that you're a people pleaser?
Yeah. So people pleasing is just when you have difficulty saying no to people because you are just afraid of how they're going to react. You want people to need you. You are afraid to just say how you feel. You do things that you don't want to do. So it's like, I feel like I should do this. And even though I don't want to, I'm going to do it because I don't want that other person to think negatively about me. Having a disagreement is very, very, very uncomfortable. And so you would rather just shut it down and say nothing and run away than address that and have a conversation. And, you know, people pleasers can be notorious friend jumpers, right? So it's like this situation with my friend is so uncomfortable, but I don't want to have a conversation about it. So I'm just going to kind of like start to ghost them. And now we're not friends anymore because it's easier to run away and try to find a new friend than just have a conversation. And that goes the same for spouses and stuff as well. It's just easier to shut down and just apologize, even if you're not wrong, just to make that uncomfortable feeling go away of having somebody be unhappy with you. You know, one thing that I experienced personally was if somebody was unhappy with me or mad at me, like I literally would be physically affected. Like I just felt ill that somebody could possibly be mad at me. And you just try to really control how other people see you. And so we kind of talk about this a little bit, or I talk on my Instagram a little bit. It's like when you want to say no to something or you can't go, instead of just saying I can't make it, you list all your reasons and excuses and justifications. But do you know why you're doing that? It's because you're so worried that they're going to think less of you or be mad at you or maybe not need you as much. But if you can convince them that your reasons are so justifiable, there's no reason that they can be unhappy with you.
Yeah.
And the hard part is that it stretches into lies. So I know I'm guilty of it. You don't have to admit to it, but you know, I will make up lies to not go and do something because the lies sound so great that I'm like, you can't get mad at me for not coming.
Yeah,
because somebody slashed my tire and I'm stranded in Vancouver or whatever. So it's just like, those are kind of a lot of the common things. It's just basically, it's rooted in just feeling very uncomfortable with other people's negative reactions. And so you do and say whatever they want or hide parts of yourself. You know, you see this a lot in teenagers. They'll go along with a group, even though they don't agree with it or they don't think it's okay or they don't think it's funny, but they just would rather be accepted in that moment than use their voice.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Would you say that it also is when you just put yourself last?
Yeah.
Put everyone's
You're
needs
uncomfortable
first.
to make yourself a priority.
Yeah, keep everyone else happy. And is it like also, I've heard about people who like, I can't think of the word, like they change, like they're a little chameleon, like with every group they're a little bit different because they want to like fit in with that group and they want to blend.
Oh, you're really into skiing? Like I'm going to get into skiing. And then you're not friends with them anymore and you sell your skis on Marketplace. You know, so you're just like always shifting. And there's this really deep rooted need to be needed. And I know, for an example, like let's say my best friend is calling me and she really wants to talk about something super, super important. So I'm like her go-to person and I'm like feeling so good about myself. Like, but I can't talk to her in that moment. So that brings up a big, huge fear for me that if I'm not there and available for her right this second, she's not going to call me anymore in the future. Or she's going to go to another friend and that other friend is going to take my place and she's not going to need me anymore. So I'm going to like stress out and be frazzled and try to take her call and be there for her because I don't want to risk the fact that she might get advice from someone else or might not need me as much. So a lot of what we do is rooted in, I want this person to need me. And that comes into parenting as well. When your kids get older and you're just like, have a difficult time setting a boundary with them or letting them feel uncomfortable feelings because you want them to rely on you and need you. And so you almost kind of cut them off at the knees so that they are dependent on you. And that's how people pleasing can show up in motherhood as well later on. It's not always the people around us that we're trying to control and manipulate how they feel about us and the in-laws and parents and stuff. A lot of times we are unknowingly sometimes putting that onto our kids and teaching them how to be codependent on us because we have our own need that we want them to be close by and to need us.
Yeah. Does people pleasing stem from like confidence or self-esteem, or is it more than that? Or is it that just a part of it?
It stems from lack of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry, that's what I mean.
Lack of
like not having
lack
those.
of self-esteem, lack of confidence. You know, I can just say now for who I am today, am I always confident? Do I always have the highest self-esteem and self-worth? No, of course I waver in that. But I'm confident enough and self-worth enough that I am fearless in just saying what I need and letting go of people that are not going to abide by that. Yeah. And I've had some uncomfortable situations in my life and they lead to lasting discomfort. One being a neighbor that I have to look at her house every single day and we're not friends anymore. But in that moment, I chose to seek after treatment that I feel that I deserve and friendship and respect that I feel like I deserve. And so I had to cut that off. And I just had enough self-worth in myself that I was like, no, I'm not willing to accept that.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
And what about boundaries? Is there like a quick definition or is there something how would you describe a boundary?
Are just, it's just communicating what you need and what you'll tolerate and what you won't, right? Yep. And I sort of used this example in Ignite. It's like, think about your backyard, right? That is a very clearly defined boundary. Yeah. It's got fences, it's got boundary lines, you know, you're even legally not allowed to like build over or in a certain area. And think about your backyard. Like, do you just let anybody come into your backyard? No. Of course not. Do you let anybody just change your furniture or draw on your fence or pick your fruit or whatever? No. We are taught to protect our physical boundaries and we are empowered to do that. And it's like, no, you don't let anybody do that. You do this, this, or this if that happens. But when it comes to our emotional boundaries, we are often taught or modeled that it's better to just not do anything because you don't want to make someone else feel uncomfortable. Right. Yeah. Like you don't want to make Uncle Joe uncomfortable or Uncle Steve is going to get mad if you tell him to stop kissing you on the lips or whatever. It's like we care more about how Uncle Steve feels than how you feel right now. And a lot of us, unfortunately, were taught and modeled that. And I think a lot of the times unknowingly, I think our moms were just taught and modeled that.
For sure.
And their moms and their moms and their moms. And it just stems back from a place where women were naturally just not allowed to have a voice.
For sure. Yeah.
And they had to. Yeah.
It all comes back to the old patriarchy that,
Yeah. And our generation is just starting to wake up and be like, no.
Smash that shit.
I know. But it's, I mean, it's great that we are having kids in this generation. We're raising kids and it's not completely gone. It's, we're still a work in progress, but it is slowly getting better that, we can use our voice and we can have these things. And I think deep down, I've had a lot of those uncomfortable thoughts about myself recently. And I think it's because of having kids, having 2 girls. Like, what do I want them to see? And it makes you have to, really look at yourself. But overall, I'm grateful that I'm putting the work in now, and I'm starting to have some of these uncomfortable situations or conversations with people and myself and my spouse. And, it's hard, but I think it's worth it when I look at what I want to model for my family and my children and how I don't want them to be a people pleaser when they grow up like I am. I want them to know their self-worth. And so in order for them to do that, I have to put the work in for myself in order to help them achieve that. So
2 things I just want to jump in on is the first one. I think there's a lot of, I know it's meant to be funny, but there's a lot of normalizing of people pleasing on social media, lots of memes and stuff where it's just like, I'm a people pleaser, so I blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just rest in that. Yeah. But I want to start encouraging you to like, just stop calling yourself a people pleaser. Because when we call ourselves a people pleaser, it's easier to fall back into all those old behaviors and traits. Yeah. And so just, you're not a people pleaser. Yeah. Okay, we're not going to say that anymore. Yeah. And maybe we could be like a recovering people pleaser or someone that is working on trying not to be, but don't identify yourself in that anymore.
Nope, that makes total sense.
The second thing is, my daughter is getting a little bit older now and she's 8, so I've had a little bit more groundwork with her. But when you actually get to see what you're teaching them come out in their own lives, it just feels so good. And, she was having a birthday party, and in the previous years, one of her friends that came just would kind of get a little pouty, or she didn't really like how she had to share her friend, and she would sort of sit off to the side and not have a good time. And so I've been teaching my daughter, like, it's not your responsibility to make sure she's happy.
Yes.
Like, you're inviting her, you are talking to her, you're trying to include her, you are being a good friend. If she chooses that she wants to go and sit out, then that's her choice. That's not your responsibility. And so she came home after she sent the invitation and she said, well, if she comes to my birthday party and she's not having a good time, it's not my job to make sure she's having a good time. Look at her go. I don't have to. Yeah. And so it's nice to see it coming out in their life that you always have to be inclusive. You always have to be kind. You always have to make sure you're being respectful. But how another person feels or what they choose to do is not in your control.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just a reminder for all of us, right?
For sure.
If mother-in-law, mother, spouse, whoever wants to go and have a temper tantrum and they don't like what you have to say, that does not make you an inconvenience. It doesn't make you less lovable. It doesn't change anything about who you are. That just shows their inability to handle or cope with what you have to say.
For sure.
And that's their journey to process through that.
I love the talk on Instagram that you've posted a lot about this, how the people that benefit the most from you not having boundaries are the people that like don't respect your boundaries, or I can't remember how it's worded, but that's so true, that the people who don't like your boundaries are the ones that were benefiting from you not having them. And those are the people that,
they're probably going to be the ones that are like criticizing you and, oh, you've changed. And like, oh, I've had, like with that person that I had to cut out of my life, she was throwing the word boundaries in, like, oh, I'm going to set a boundary, and just being very condescending and stuff like that. And those are just the red flags of no. And so people want to keep you small when they've benefited off of you being small.
For sure.
And them getting to do whatever they want.
So what are some common themes you see in the people that you work with?
That boundaries feel mean. They feel aggressive. And I can say, in my own experience of starting to set boundaries in my life, that is something that I heard.
Yeah, from people.
I was being very kind with my delivery, and they're like, you just aggressively came at me. And there's this narrative that when women are assertive, that we're being aggressive or you're being a bitch.
Yeah.
And women are afraid of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that is something that really stops people. And what you said too, it's like, I feel responsible for how other people feel. And we have to look at that. Where is that rooted in? Where did that come from? Did your parents or caregivers when you were growing up make you feel like you were responsible for how they felt or how they reacted, and the circumstances around you were because of you, that's something to look at too, right?
Yeah. Cutting into some deep wounds here.
Well,
yeah. I mean, all things I'm working on in therapy,
Yes.
but yeah.
And we have to as well, because when you start to look at those roots, you're able to reparent yourself and say, okay, just because my parents made me feel this way or my caregiver didn't mean that it was right. They just didn't know at that time. They have their own issues. They're going through their own stuff. They have their own unhealed
wounds,
traumas or wounds or whatever. And just because I felt that way doesn't mean it's true.
For sure.
Right?
100%.
And I think when you become a mom and you have the blessing of having kids in your life and you want to break those cycles, I think that's what's motivating a lot of women to make these changes.
For sure.
Because they're looking at their daughter or their sons and they're saying, I don't want you to grow up feeling like this. And so I have to set the example. And I can't just tell you to do it, but I'm not doing it in my own life, right? Like that was something that really changed my body image. And the way I felt about my body is I thought, I can't tell my daughter that she's beautiful and to love herself and that all bodies are different and worthy in their own way. And then I'm looking in the mirror, picking myself apart and hating myself. So I needed to learn how to walk the walk first.
For sure. And then they just see you doing it and they don't have to relearn their own behaviors when they're adults. They're not going to do that same journey.
She's not going to see me ever say something negative about my body or look at myself in the mirror with disgust or any of that kind of stuff. So she's just not going to know that version. For sure. Whereas when I was growing up, that's what I heard. It's like, oh, my cellulite and my stretch marks and that woman shouldn't be wearing those pants and look at her, she shouldn't have spandex. And, so we take in what we hear growing up, even if it's not directed at us. If we hear or see something, we take that to be what the reality is.
For sure. We're little sponges.
And we have to start to look at those beliefs and be like, is that how I really feel about cellulite or stretch marks or whatever? Or is that just what I was led up to believe and to think?
You were talking about themes. You were talking about that, like boundaries are mean and that we kind of believe the things that we hear other people say over and over again. So what are some other common challenges that women, like what are the other themes? That boundaries are mean and that like it's our job to fix people and our job to fix their emotions or...
Yeah, and there's just this deep fear and discomfort with other people's disapproval or disappointment or, I'm thinking of like the mother-in-law, right? It's like we are so afraid to set a boundary with our mother-in-law because of how she's going to react. So a lot of people don't say what they want to say because of the fear of how the other person is going to perceive that.
I feel like parenting brings up a lot of boundaries. Like it's just a huge example of how to set boundaries and it starts as soon as like when you have your child and who are you going to let come to the hospital? And so many people don't want visitors, but they feel like they have to have visitors. So they don't want anyone to hold their baby, yet they say yes anytime someone comes over. Like I feel like it starts so early on when you have a baby. I think it's important to set those boundaries early on because it's also going to follow you through your entire parenting journey. If you never say anything to those in-laws, then they're going to continue to do everything that they've been doing.
So I want to give you a tool for that, if that's okay. So you aren't going to set the boundary if you're not confident that it's going to help you more than it's going to hurt you. And so sometimes that can be challenging. It's easy to do things for our kids, right? I even think about spending money. It's like, if I want to get a shirt, it's like, oh, I don't know, it's $25. But for them, it's like, like whatever you want. So it's just easier with kids. So I always say, okay, start with that. So play out this scenario if you don't set the boundary. So let's say, for example, you don't really want people holding your baby yet. You're feeling a little bit nervous about it. There's a lot of germs going around right now. You don't want them to get sick. So if I stay in fear and I stay in worry about how they're going to perceive it or what kind of pushback I'm going to get, and then somebody does hold my baby and gets them sick, was that going to be worth not saying it?
Exactly. What a good one.
So play out what will happen if you don't set that boundary. And I know that the mama bear instinct is going to take over and you're going to be like, oh, hell no, I'm setting that boundary.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, I don't want my child eating certain foods because they're not ready for it yet. But mom or mother-in-law keeps disrespecting that, well, are you going to just let them and take the risk? What if they choke? What if something terrible happens? Was that worth staying quiet and being a nuisance, right? So really play out, what can happen if you don't. And I know that mama bear instinct will kick in and you'll be like, okay, now I have the confidence that I can set it because I don't want that thing to happen.
Sure. Yeah. And I feel like that can also help you just let the things that aren't important go.
Yeah. It's a good opportunity to evaluate what is important and what you do want to communicate. Like, sometimes it's like in parenting, you have to pick your battles, right? And so it's like, yeah, if they want to buy a toy, do I need it? No. Do I want it? No. But I can't control everything and I can't dictate everything that's going on around me. And so I'm going to just let that one go. I'm going to just save the communication for the big boundaries that are super important to me.
And I find it easier to pick the stupid little battles that don't really matter, that it's more just to like, you're trying to be like, oh, I'm going to set boundaries. So you do like the like little ones that don't really matter. And then the big ones that like really affect me and I actually really feel are important, I don't do, because then I'm like burnt out from worrying about the little things, Write
it down, right? So it's like, okay, if I'm feeling annoyed about this, and this, just like write it down. And over the next couple of days, I'm sure as you process it, it won't be that big of a deal. Like we don't have to always say the first thing that comes to our head or, sometimes it's just taking that time to process it. And you'll realize, okay, maybe that's not so important, but I want to really start to put my energy into this big boundary that's affecting my life and my feelings.
And using that, picturing what would happen if I didn't say something is very helpful, because it's the same where like about the little things you can be like, okay, that I can let go.
So if someone wants to start kind of the basics of setting boundaries, what is a good place to start? Or is it that, like you just said, giving us that tool of asking those questions, like is that a good place to start?
So I would say the best place to start is, well, there's a few different. So if you want to start the internal work, let's start to look at what am I looking for out of these relationships. So let's say, for example, there's something I want to say or a boundary I want to set, but I'm afraid. Let's start to examine, what am I afraid of happening? What am I looking for in this relationship? And so I know I spoke about it at Ignite, right? I was pouring myself into this relationship that was one-sided and I was doing everything and I was getting so resentful and I couldn't figure out, why am I even still doing this when I'm not getting it back in return? And it's because there was a teenage girl inside of me that just really wanted acceptance and validation by a certain person, because in my mind, they had status. And that was like, whoa, such an aha moment. But when you're journeying through recovering from people pleasing, you cannot be afraid to have honest looks at your own self, because I hate to say it. Okay, so people pleasing is supposed to be nice and kind, and it's supposed to be a blessing to other people in his life. But a lot of times it's selfish. A lot of times we're actually trying to control certain things around us and the way people see us and perceive us. And a lot of the times we have a need inside that we are trying to force onto other people that they didn't sign up for. And so we have to look at that, right?
Yeah.
Why am I trying to get this person to like me or to accept me, or why am I afraid of their rejection? And what's going on for you? Where's your needs coming from? So we all have needs. Maybe some of us want to be liked, accepted. Maybe we want to control circumstances. Maybe we want to be admired. Maybe we want to feel safe. We want to feel loved. And so all those needs are valid and everybody should feel that way. But it's how we go about trying to get those needs met that becomes problematic.
I see. So
I'm trying to feel loved and safe. And in order to get that, I am trying to sacrifice myself and do everything that you ask and try to be perfect for you, because I hope that if I earn it enough, you will love me and make me feel safe. But that's not true. That's not authentic. That's not honest.
I like what you said about people pleasing, that you're actually, it can be a selfish thing, that you're actually trying to do it for yourself. And in a way you like frame it that you're actually trying to make other people happy, but it sounds like when you really look at the root of it, you're trying to make yourself happy by making them happy.
You're trying to make them happy so that you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Keep it
for your own self.
Yeah.
I think these are hard things to talk about or to really like look at, because you have to evaluate yourself and you have to look within, and that's so uncomfortable for so many people. I know for years, like I am still working on the people pleasing and setting boundaries. That's a work in progress for me. But it's hard to look within and to really question, like, where is this coming from? And it's been years of therapy and working with a therapist that has really brought out some of these questions and has got me to really look at, where is this coming from? And what's the worst that could happen? Yeah. Like, why aren't you doing these things? Or
it's hard. It is, but it's so liberating. I just want to jump in and say that when you can actually have an honest look at yourself and have some humility and say, like, okay, this is an area where not being my best self, where I could be better, and you overcome that, it is such a freeing feeling. So I really encourage it. And I want to say, yes, okay, I use the word selfish because it is, but
self-serving.
Not in a bad way. Like, I want to say, look at yourself inside as the little girl. And it's like, just say to that little girl, like, I know that in this moment, you just want to feel loved. I know that you're just trying to feel accepted. I know that you just want to feel safe. And it's okay to validate that girl inside of you that really wants those things. But then that's where the parent steps in and says, but that's just not the way to get it. The way to get it is to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to have people in your life that want to hear your boundaries and want to respect your boundaries. And so I'm going to protect you through this. And you're going to get those needs met, but you're just going to start to get them met by the right people.
For sure.
And stop chasing it from the wrong people who are toxic or emotionally unavoilable or are just there to take from you. You're almost protecting that little girl inside.
Yeah. How do you know when boundaries are like... So I have a few questions here. Let's talk about how to actually set a boundary. Like, what do you say? What do you do? And then also, how do you know when it's working and somebody's respecting it? Or like if you need to reevaluate, or let's go through the process of boundaries.
So I always say, like, if you are not using your voice at all, and I think you might have said this in the questions, I'm not sure, but even just choosing a restaurant be something that brings up some anxiety. It's just like, I don't know, I just want you to be happy, so you just pick the restaurant.
Yeah, that's me to a T. I'm just like, I'll eat anywhere, wherever's going to make you happy. I'll find something. Like, I never pick because I think I'm being nice.
Okay, but why though? What's underneath that?
Yeah, because I want to make them happy. I want them to be happy with me. I think I frame it in my mind that I just have an easy personality. I just like, I tell myself like, I'm just so easygoing. But really, I do.
All people pleasers tell themselves.
I know.
I'm so relaxed.
But really, I care where we eat. But yeah, I want them to be happy with me. And I think it stems from like being bullied in elementary school. This is it. You all don't need to know my my little girl story, but I think that's where it comes from.
It's helpful.
Yeah.
But let's play that out. So if you're gonna go out and meet a friend, and let's say you really want to go to Cactus Club, and so you say that, are they going to be unhappy with you?
No. And it was
because you said you want to go to Cactus Club?
This is something that you talked about, I think at the Ignite Summit or at Belly's. I don't know when you talked about this, but it's something that I replay in my mind all the time now, is that you want to be your authentic self with your friends. You want your friends to know the real you. You want to build your relationships on who you actually are and who they are. And don't you want them to know what you like? Like, don't you want them to understand the real you? Like, those are the true friendships. And so I play that in my mind a lot. Like, I want to show them who I really am. And if they love me, if they're a true friend, then they're going to want to know the real me. And I know that it sounds silly relating that to a restaurant, but if I'm really craving, what's my favorite thing? The lettuce wraps from Cactus Club.
Everybody's favorite.
If I'm really craving those, like, why can't I tell them, like, this is my favorite, I really want this? I want them to know who I am, and I want them to know what I actually do like and what I love, and I want to build our friendship and our foundations on the truth. So I think about that a lot, and you had touched on it in one of the talks that you did, and I loved that.
And that's why it's important to pause before you respond, because pausing gives you an opportunity to have these self-talks with yourself. So it's like, okay, I want to just jump in and say, whatever you want, like, it's all good. I'm fine with whatever, but don't. Just pause and be like, okay, how do I feel right now? What do I want? Oh, I actually am really craving the lettuce wraps from Cactus Club, but okay, I'm worried to say it. But again, I want these friendships and I want this honesty and I will blah, blah, blah. And you start to do that self-talk. You're going to come in with a lot more confidence to just be like, let's go to Cactus Club tonight. And you know, your friend's going to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, we're so afraid
like, oh yeah,
of saying what we need. And with the right people, they just are like, sure, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I think something that's important to look at is, okay, when your worth is stemmed from other people, you're going to be afraid to have these honest conversations, and you're going to be afraid to ask for these friendships that you're looking for, because you'd rather just take anybody in your life than lose them and have maybe one or two friends for a while until you can build those new relationships. Yeah. And so if you are coming from a place where you're like, I only feel worthy and good when I'm surrounded by a bunch of people and I'm popular and, you know, I have a lot of followers, a lot of likes, I live in a certain house, I drive a certain car, I have a certain income, all of those things, you're not going to want to lose that to have an honest friendship. So you really have to start to build your self-worth from within. Okay. So like things that can't be taken away from you. Like you could lose that job. You could move from that house. Your friends could, you know, oust you and you'd be on the outside. It's like, but those circumstances don't change your worth when you've built it from the inside. And it's like, I am valuable and worthy because, and you have to fill in the blank for what makes you worthy and valuable. Things that nobody can take away from you.
I love that.
And so when you come from a place of self-worth, then you're not afraid to ask for those honest, mutually respectful relationships.
Why don't we learn about this in school? Yeah. Just
I know. That's my goal, ladies. When my kids get a bit older, I'm like, I'm getting into schools and this is becoming curriculum because it shouldn't be that we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s sometimes learning about these things.
Actually, and it like relates to so many different parts of just adulting and like even in motherhood, like your body changes, your relationships change, your relationship with your partner, with your family, with your friends. And it's like all of these huge changes and then all of the layers peel off. And then you don't actually, a lot of people don't have any self-worth in themselves. Yeah. And then all of a sudden their life crumbles and, you know, like no wonder, because all of these things that made you feel good and valuable were all external. And then when you actually have to look into yourself, you're like, well, I'm useless. I'm trash, you know?
And you have to start opening your eyes to the things around you that put your emphasis on those things in the beginning. So it's like my parents maybe put a lot of priority in status and what kind of job I have and how much income I have or what kind of body I'm in. Okay, so that's your parental. Okay, the media, obviously we all know the magazines and the everything like that, the movies, the body image that is put out for women. And then there's all the products and the marketing and the advertising. It's like, you know, just a plethora of products that are telling you that something is wrong with you. And so when the world is telling you that you have to look a certain way or be a certain way to be beautiful or worthy or loved or attractive or whatever, when those things change, you're left with feeling insecure and low self-esteem and vulnerable. It's like, when your body transitions, if I put all my worth into having like a sick ass body that everybody was jealous of, and now all of a sudden I'm 40 pounds heavier, I'm going to feel like a bag of crap, right? Because just my body has changed and all my worth was put in that. So it's like, it has to come from who you are as a person.
For sure.
That's what makes you valuable. So anyways, I know that was like a big deviation from your question. Like, how do you set a boundary?
It's important.
But I would just say
you have to know your self-worth. And then once you know what your self-worth is, you have to set boundaries so that people respect that and that you respect that yourself. And so this can bring us right back to boundaries. And
I want to say too, it's not a journey where you're just going to decide that your worth comes from within and you're never going to feel insecure again. Okay. So it's like, that's not realistic, but you get to a place where you can sort of talk yourself back into that healthy place, or you have the tools to move through it as opposed to going into the pit of despair when something has changed in your life. Okay. So how do you start to set boundaries? So that's going to be different depending on where you're coming from. If you're coming from a place where you never say anything, you always let people pick the restaurant, you always are just easygoing, you never have a voice, then it's unrealistic to go and have this intense, deep boundary setting communication with your mother-in-law. Like, that's just not going to happen. So activate your voice. So in these moments, like we've talked about, if you want to go to Cactus Club, say you want to go to Cactus Club, right? That's not a boundary, but you're starting to use your voice. You're starting to get used to taking up a little space. You're feeling it out. How are people going to react to me, like saying what I want? And just start to be honest. So when things pop up in your mind and you're like, I want this, just start saying that. And those things are going to start to get your confidence up, and it's going to get you used to speaking, but it's also going to show you what kind of friends you have in your life too, or what kind of people you have in your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Like their responses to that, you having a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're recovering from people pleasing, that doesn't mean that nobody else ever gets their way again, or you're always the center and you're like, no, I want a Cactus Club.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't care what you want. That is not going to
Yeah.
happen, but it's just starting to take up a little space in your relationships and just starting to ask for some needs to be met as well. And sometimes that's where the compromise comes in, right? So sometimes we're going to go where you want, and sometimes we're going to go where I want. That's a healthy relationship.
And sometimes
It's
you might
balanced.
not actually care where you go. Like sometimes it might be that you're like, you know what?
Sometimes-
I am good. I'm good with whatever.
So run with that. It's all about being authentic.
Yes.
And if in that moment you feel like you don't really care, then say that. But if you do have a preference, say that. So just leaning into that authenticity.
All right. So activate your voice.
Yeah.
With the little things, baby steps.
Activate your voice. So that's how you're going to ease into it. And another thing to recognize is when you're asking for something and when you're setting a boundary. So a lot of the times where people get stuck up is they think they're setting a boundary and they're like, I set this boundary and I communicated what I need, and they are not respecting it. And then I said, well, what did you say? And then when they play it back to me, it's like, well, you were just asking them, or you left the ball in their court if they wanted to accept that or not. So I'm sure you guys know Dr. Becky. She has the good inside. So one example that she used as a request and a boundary is, okay, you have to go to the bathroom and your kid's coloring with the markers. And you say like, honey, I have to go to the bathroom. Like, please don't color on the walls while mommy's gone. Okay. You think you're setting a boundary. You think you're saying, don't draw on the walls while I'm gone. And really what you're doing is leaving the room with a toddler with markers and letting them decide if they are going to listen to what you said or not. That's a request. Okay. So a boundary is, I have to go to the bathroom. So I'm going to take these markers and I'm going to put them up on the fridge. And when I get back, I will give them back to you and you can keep drawing.
Got it.
That is a boundary. You are taking control of that situation. You are letting them know what's not going to happen. You are being the authority there.
No gray.
So you can see, so sometimes we'll say like, could you just be nicer to me? Maybe you're talking to your husband or something like that. Okay. So they're going to decide if they want to or not. And what is nicer, it's very general. Like sometimes we're just not being very clear. So a boundary would be like, I know you're stressed from work and you're tired, but you don't get to talk to me that way. That's a boundary. I understand where you're coming from. I get it, but I will not be treated that way.
Yeah.
So
it's clear.
When you say that, I'm just like, I definitely don't set boundaries very well, because I'm always like, well, maybe if it would be okay, could you please not say that to me? Or like, you know what I mean? Yeah. I have to wrap it up in this pretty nice bow where I'm still asking in a nice way. Like, not that what you said is rude at all, but I think I am definitely just making requests in like I'm trying to set boundaries, but I'm not doing it very well.
Yeah, there's a difference between a request or a question and a boundary. Like the request is gray, the boundary is black or white. It's like, this is what I need. This,
And you know what? It's not like boundaries are
permanent,
aggressive, and you're coming in with a snarl and you're being cruel. You can say it in a kind way. Yeah. And you can come from a place where it's like, I understand what you're going through right now, and I get that. But it hurts me when you treat me that way. And so you can't take your bad mood out on me or whatever it is. So
like you can still have empathy. It's not like it has to be rude or mean. You can still understand why something's happening, but you can say what you can, express some empathy, validate their concerns or what they're going through, but then also tell them what you need and how you're going to get that.
Yeah. And I think that's the best way to do it because the ultimate goal is to have a respectful, loving relationship. And that includes your part in it too. And so let's say we're talking about mom or mother-in-law. It's like, you know what? I do really value you. You're such a support for me. but I'm just not looking for advice at this time. Or, you know, I know what I'm doing here. This is what works for me. So if that changes, I'll come and ask you.
Yeah.
So validate that experience in the beginning, that you are important to me and I do value what you have to say. But in this area, I'm confident in it and I know what works for me and my child. So, but if that changes, I will definitely come and ask you. You know,
Yeah.
That's nice.
For sure. It's very nice.
That is very nice.
Yeah. It's also nice to yourself
Right?
because you're expressing your needs. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
And it's like, have a realistic expectation of what you're going to get back in return. I mean, I think most of us can say we know our own moms or our own dads or whoever, caretaker. We, depending on how long or what kind of relationship, we probably know our in-laws as well. And so you probably know what kind of reaction that you're going to get. And so play out the boundary first before you're going to have these conversations. It's like, okay, this is what I want to set a boundary in. So this is how I would like to word it. And I write it down and I kind of like practice it so I'm comfortable with it. And like, what kind of reaction am I going to expect here? Like, I know my mother-in-law is going to roll her eyes and be like, you know, have some snarky comment to say. And I have to learn and prepare to just let that go because her reaction is not my responsibility.
Yep.
And she'll get over it and she'll move on. My baby right now is more important in this circumstance than my mother-in-law's comfort. You know, these are all the things you have to talk about with yourself before you go in and set the boundary. You know, sometimes boundaries are easy. And when you're in a safe, mutually respectful relationship, you can just go on a whim and say what you need because you know that other person is going to react with kindness and love and respect. But there are always going to be relationships in our life and some that we can't get away from, that there's going to be some pushback or some guilt tripping or even some gaslighting. And so you have to prepare yourself before you go in so that when it comes at you, you know how to handle it.
But in those situations, regardless of whether or not your boundary is going to be respected, it's still beneficial to set it. Is that like if it's a relationship that's going to be in your life, say it's an in-law and like you're tied to them and you want them in your life, but they're not going to respect your boundary. You still set boundaries? Is that like what, how do you navigate that? But by the way, not my mother-in-law. She's an angel. She is, I think, the only mother-in-law that people love. She's great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you know what? There are a lot of amazing. And just because somebody isn't respecting your boundary doesn't make them an evil.
Yeah. Doesn't make them bad. Either. It just means they need to do their own work. Yeah.
And that's another thing to acknowledge as well is that even the most loving, supportive people might not have an initial great reaction to your boundary. Okay. So think about if dynamics have been a certain way for a long time, maybe they're kind of tired from work or whatever. There can be circumstances where they might react poorly to your boundary. And so that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm just going to cut you off now and you're just so disrespectful to me and you don't care about me, blah, blah, blah. It's like allow people to process what you've said and it's how they come back. That's important. So it's like, okay, I, you know, was tired from work and I didn't handle that well, but ultimately, babe, like, I don't want you to feel stressed out or I don't want you to feel. And so like, I hear what you're saying, you know, that's a positive way to come back into the circumstance. It's when that doesn't happen that things need to be reevaluated, but allow people to still process what you're saying. And especially when you're going from a extreme people pleaser to setting boundaries, people aren't going to be used to this new version of you.
Yeah.
People are like, wait. Like we've been doing this for 10 years and I always get my way. What do you mean now this is changing? Yeah. And they might not like that, but allow them the grace and the time to come around and meet you back respectfully. Don't just cut them off or anybody off when they don't instantly react positively to your boundaries.
And like you said, you've thought about this, you've worked this through, you've done all this work, and this time has, you know, put into this boundary that they also deserve a little bit of time to think through everything and like maybe reflect on how your relationship has been going and have they been, you know, doing whatever boundary you're talking about. Like, have they been disrespecting you? And, you know, it makes sense to give them that time to come back. And I think that's, have a little bit of grace for
and
them.
So going back to your question about, do I set this boundary in this relationship that I know it's not going to go well? Well, that's up to you. So play out the circumstance. Maybe you have a very overbearing mother-in-law. And I feel so bad for mother-in-laws.
I know.
I know.
Such a bad rap.
You
know, we're going to be a mother-in-law one day.
We're just using this as an example.
We're
not saying an example.
Bad.
Yeah.
It can be anybody. It can be a father-in-law. It could be a friend. It could be anybody in your life. The reason I'm using mother-in-law is because they're in our lives and they're a big presence in our family. And sometimes we don't always have the same relationship with them as maybe we do with our own mom. And you know what? Sometimes it's actually easier to be honest with the mother-in-law than it is with your own mom.
Yep.
So sorry for mother-in-laws. I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just using it as an example, right? So let's say you have a really overbearing, let's say in-law or a parent, and they're coming in and they're not respecting your boundaries and they're taking over and they're telling you what to do. Maybe you say like, I don't want little Bobby driving in the car with you unless he has his car seat. And then they zip him up to the store and back with no car seat. You know, those kind of disrespectful boundaries. So you have to play out, if I don't set a boundary here, what are things going to look like in the next 6 months? What are things going to look like in the next year? What are things going to look like in the next 6 years? Now little Bobby's going with Papa to the pub. You know, so it's just like, you have to play out what's going to happen if I don't set this boundary, and what is my life going to look like? And you know, I want my child to respect me. I want them to look at me for the answers. I want to guide them in the beliefs and the systems and the loves that I'm creating for my own self, which is, you know, like one boundary I had to set with my parents is like, I don't want you talking about other people's bodies in front of my kids.
Yeah.
And like, let me tell you, that was hard for me and that was uncomfortable. And they're like, you know, so baffled and insulted. But it's like, it's just not necessary. Like every time you run into somebody that we used to know, you don't have to say like, look at her.
I don't need an update on what they look like.
Yes. We talk about this all the time. Karlee and I talk about this all the time because we're trying to make an effort to not ever say those things in front of our children about ourselves or anyone else. Yeah. But it's very hard to control everyone else around you. However, if they are very close in your life, like you said, your parents, your in-laws, people that are constantly going to be around your children, maybe that's an important boundary to set. Like, it's
and their children look up to them too, right? So it's not just strangers that they don't really care about. Like these are important, influential people. And that was a very uncomfortable talk for me. And I didn't want to do it. And I knew that they weren't going to be receptive to it. But when I played out what would happen if I didn't, and the type of communication and input that my kids were going to be receiving from that and how that might affect my daughter, especially with her body image, I was like, no question.
Yes.
I will deal with the short-term discomfort to protect that. So when you really start to play it out, it gives you the confidence to it's going to be uncomfortable. Okay, it's not easy.
And how cool is that for your kids that they get to grow up seeing a mom who is loving and caring and supportive and validating, but also has the ability to set boundaries and respect other people's boundaries and show people that it is an act of self-love to do those things, so that when they're growing up, when they're older, they aren't going to have to then learn all of this in adulthood and then break all of these habits and patterns that are not beneficial. So like, how cool for them that they get to see that.
And you're protecting them.
For sure.
A question about when you start setting boundaries, do you find that it's a good first person to set boundaries with is your spouse or significant other? Because I fear that women are going to start to set these boundaries, say with their in-laws, but if you've never had these conversations with your spouse, like I feel like you need to have their support in order to effectively set these boundaries with someone like your in-laws. Do you find that comes into play? Okay.
I would say, of course, talk about it with your significant other. And of course, you want their support and their input. But what are you going to do if, maybe, for example, let's use this conversation about our own body image. Let's say grandparents are, don't eat so much ice cream, you're going to get fat and blah, blah, blah. And maybe that's really, so in my experience, it was very triggering for me because I spent a lot of my life in disordered eating and having extreme body image issues. And so for me, it's like a big, big boundary. Maybe my husband doesn't, maybe it's like, just ignore them. They're just, you know. And so if you don't have the support of your significant other, are you then not going to set that boundary? That's something that you have to look at. So of course, you want to talk about it with your spouse first and say, listen, I would like to say this to your mom or my mom. And this is important to me, and you want to hope that they're just like, yeah, okay, no, I got your back or whatever. But in the event that maybe it's not that big of a deal for them, I mean, that's up to you how important it is to still set that boundary.
This just comes up a lot in my relationship, and almost this exact same thing is an in-law that comments a lot about physical image, and it is a huge trigger for me. Yeah. But my husband's just like, meh. If you want to say something, say something. But I'm like, but do you care? Like, do you not see what I'm saying?
Right. And people are not always going to care to the same degree or magnitude that you are, because this is coming from your own wounds too, right? And they might not have those experiences. So maybe for them, it's not that big of a deal, but for you, it's huge. And that's why boundaries are personal.
For sure. And that goes back to activating your voice and expressing your needs. So then if your partner doesn't know this is triggering and they don't know why it's triggering or that it bothers you, then why they're not going to give two craps about the boundary because they don't think it's important. But if you can explain to them why it is important, and going back to talking about our needs, it's hard.
Change is hard, though. We're not saying this is supposed to be easy to all of a sudden become, a boundary setter and not have to, this is a hard topic, and that's why it's important. And we were excited to talk about it today. It's one of those things that you almost have to in pieces. You need to start small, you need to start slow, and it's not going to be something like you said overnight that all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to stop people pleasing. It's a lot harder and more in depth than that because of you have to look inside yourself as well. There's kind of different layers to it, right?
And that's where you need to hold on to the motivation of who you want to be and what you want to become, because there are going to be moments where you want to just shrink back and resort to old ways. And you have to decide in that moment, do I want to continue to live this way and feel resentful and stressed out and exhausted and frustrated, or do I want to persevere through this discomfort and I get to be empowered and confident and grow my self-worth and surround myself with positive people that care about me. And so when you play those two out, hang on to that version that you really, really want to persevere and push through those discomforts.
Yeah, I like that. Can you set boundaries with yourself?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a place to start.
Yes, boundaries with ourselves.
Yeah.
It can be, just not taking on so much. Yeah. Even though you're, let's say for example, you're just exhausted and you have a party or something on the weekend and you're just like, I'm just so tired. I know I need this night to myself. When you say no to that, that is actually setting a boundary within your own self, because you're like, I am going to prioritize right now my needs. I'm going to rest, and you need to do this.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good place to start for some people too, if it's uncomfortable for them to set boundaries with other people. But I guess setting boundaries with yourself, you're also kind of setting boundaries with other people. Sometimes, maybe not always, but maybe that's a place.
I mean, a boundary, it could be just for yourself. I'm going to set a boundary where I'm going to go to bed by 10 p.m. every night because I'm staying up till midnight and then I'm getting up in the night and I'm just so exhausted and angry and I don't like who I am. So my new boundary is that I'm just going to go to bed at 10 o'clock. So there's no other person involved. It is just you. But it's something that's still going to benefit you, and something that sometimes we have to draw that line for ourselves.
Yeah. Now, what if we don't respect our own boundaries? What does that say about us? Because,
I think sometimes it's hard, right? Yeah. Just doing things for our own self is challenging. And, it's cliche, but it's progress, not perfection. So maybe a couple nights you go to bed at 10 and you're really good, and then you just desperately want to watch hours of TV because your sanity needs it, then whatever.
Well, I feel like, we should probably end it there. It's been over an hour, so.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk forever. I do love this topic, and I feel like I still have a lot to learn, and it's still a work in progress, so but I think it's so important. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. We loved having you, Bree.
Yeah. And tell people where they can find you.
I'm at Instagram at diary of a people pleaser _.
Yeah.
And my website is www.diaryofapeoplepleaser.com. So I do one-on-one coaching with women to help with people pleasing and boundaries, or most recently I've started to get into narcissistic abuse and coming out of relationships or navigating relationships with a narcissist, whether that be a parent or a spouse or a friendship.
For sure. That'd be very helpful.
And so you can reach me there and we can do some one-on-one coaching.
Wonderful. That's amazing. We'll put all of that in the description below. And we just want to say thank you. because this is important. So everybody go set some boundaries. Start with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bree.